Hey everyone, hope all is well. This is a prior recording. The numbers that you see on the screen, they are not accurate. They are not up to date, okay? But I want to discuss this. Let's please look at this brief recording.
That's right. They have said that this is how we're going to pay for all the spending we're going to do, is we're going to start collecting more from people and finding out ways that maybe they did something wrong. And I'll tell you, when you get down to it, and there's supposed to be like 700,000 audits that take place, and a lot of those are going to go, it's estimated that half of them are going to go to people that make $75,000 or less. When you get an audit by the IRS, you usually have to bring in professional help to defend you and to take you through this. And a lot of those people can't afford something like this. So I think it is a concern for the American people. And if somehow the author of that opinion piece thinks that American people trust the IRS otherwise, and that the GOP are lending out to some way to create distrust, that's a real misrepresentation of what's going on. And I think back on the quote by Ronald Reagan, where, hey, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. No one believes that. No one belieys that. And frankly, I don't know where they're going to get 87,000 people to do these jobs that have an accounting background.
Right, $80 billion, 6 times the current IRS budget. Again, how about just being upset about the waste of that? And Jonathan, I'm not talking about the criminal division of the IRS. They have agents who are law enforcement, who do carry guns. They are part of the investigative teams that investigate federal fraud, tax fraud, and the like. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who work on audits. And the IRS does have already incredible power to freeze your bank accounts if they say you owe them money. And you have no recourse, to the congressman's point, but to either pay up or hire lawyers. And Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, has admitted that the share won't go up of people, of middle and lower income people being audited, but that's the share, not the total number.
Are you asking Jonathan, or are you asking me?
No, Jonathan, your mic is not working, so we'll get that fixed. But Congressman, you can respond to that.
Yeah, no, I'd be glad to. You framed it perfectly. And people are trapped. The government, first of all, when it comes to audits and things like that, and the powers that the IRS already has, in most cases, they don't need guns. But I understand there's the Criminal Investigation Division. That's a separate thing. But what's really interesting too in all of this, you're trying to recoup money. How about all the fraud that has taken place from the unemployment insurance, the unemployment benefits that went out during COVID? It's estimated $400 billion. And when we were having the markup on Ways and Means for Build Back Better, I offered an amendment to go after fraud. The Democrats voted it down. They voted it down. Most of this is foreign anyway, and we should be actually going after all of that. But I was assured by the Ways and Means chairman that, you make a very good point, and we need to do that. And he told me off the record, I'm going to talk to Nancy Pelosi about this. We have to do something. We have not had one hearing about the fraud that has just ripped off the American taxpayer time and time again. Nothing has happened there.
Jonathan, jump in here.
Yeah, I would advise any American small business who is penalized by the IRS at some time in the future to just contact this author who said that the big bad Republicans were bad-mouthing and talking about this so-called boogeyman, right? Because I can tell you the IRS does have a substantial amount of power. They can freeze accounts. Not only that, they can do automatic withdrawals. I mean, and I would just ask this question. I mean, what is it really going to take for, these authors and people on the left who are writing these columns, not just in the Washington Post and whatnot, to actually come to some sense of reality and to stop assuming that people on the right and people who are right to take us seriously and to take real concern seriously, and understand that the IRS is not just some so-called scapegoat here. It's real trouble.
Okay, so let's talk about it. Yeah, it's Gonna be some real trouble. So, as he stated, and before I get into the commentary, let's look at this. IRS audits poorest families at 5 times the rate for everyone else. It says a large increase in federal income tax audits targeting the poorest wage earners allow the Internal Revenue Service to keep overall audit numbers from further declines for Americans as a whole during the fiscal year of 2021. That resulted in these low-income wage earners with less than $25,000 in total gross receipts being audited at a rate 5 times higher than everyone else. Again, that results in these low-income wage earners with less than $25,000 in total gross receipts, not AGI, adjusted gross income, $25,000 in total gross receipts being audited at a rate 5 times higher than anyone else. As my friend wants to, I'm not going to say argue, but we'll discuss. Well, he said no one's going to pay any more taxes that makes under $400,000 a year. You don't understand politics, darling. Sometimes it's what a person doesn't say. Now, if you listen to the interview, it says a lot of people will be subject to the audits that are making $75,000 or less. Here you can see poorest people whom I'm willing to bet they definitely voted for the Democrats. I understand that. But 75K or less is a lot of people. Understand this. People making 75, 25 less K or less and small business owners. When he said the choice is either to pay up or hire lawyers, do you think that they don't know that people making that kind of money can afford to hire lawyers? Really? With inflation going, really? They couldn't afford that before inflation. So what are you going to do? You don't have an option but to pay up. Are you keeping good records? And with people moving around, can't afford to stay over here, lost this apartment. Are you keeping good records? Sometimes life can be so unstable, you're trying to keep your head above water, let alone keep good records. So what are you going to do then? The $600 rule for the IRS reporting, Cash App, you have a garage sale. What if you get audited? Well, I had 2 garage sales. I do it 2 or 3 times a year, and I made $800. You got to pay taxes on that, especially if you're using, Cash App, things like that. I think Zelle, maybe not. I believe they have a different reporting system. Don't hold me to it, but that's what my understanding is. So you're going to pay on that. You're going to pay taxes on it. The items that you bought, do you have receipts to show, hey, I might be a write down because I sold this chair. The chair cost me $1,100. I sold it. I barely got $200 for it. So at a loss. Do you have a receipt for that chair? Well, no. You don't have any receipts? All you're going to have to do is pay up. So people making 75K or less, getting professional help to defend you, that costs lots. It costs a lot of money. I have heard people say it costs them tens of thousands of dollars. I couldn't believe it. Cost a whole lot of money. And not to frighten you, but it's reality. We can't walk around like in La La Land, because La La Land is not real. Now, if you also heard in that interview, he said the Dems were ignoring the unemployment crime. $400 billion. $400 billion. And did you not listen carefully? He said most of that fraud is what? Foreign. Most $400 billion on unemployment. Fake claims. Let's go after it. They voted it down. Most of it is what? Based on the report there, foreign fraud. So you're going to vote to just let that go? $400 billion, but you're going to go ahead and spend, what is it, 80 billion? You're going to hire all these IRS agents to go ahead and go after the Americans so they can pay their part. What about that $400 billion on unemployment fraud? What about that? What about the unemployment fraud? $400 billion that's due Americans. Where is that money? He said they voted it down, foreign fraud. So, okay, so maybe I'm a little slow, but it sounded like to me, if that is the case, then I guess foreigners are allowed to commit the fraud. You look the other way, but you're going after the American taxpayers? I'm not understanding. Maybe you guys can explain it to me. $400 billion. And if that is the case, then yes, the U.S. taxpayers, they are ripped off. Because they're saying, hey, we're not going to worry about those guys. Yeah, they took a little money. How much? $400 billion. Of whose money? Of our money, the taxpayers' money? Well, most of that's foreign fraud. Are you serious? So this here, but don't forget though, don't forget, poorest families at 5 times the rate of everyone else is what they're saying about the audits. Poorest families. So you think if you got an issue paying for gasoline and food on your table, yeah, you're right, they got a lawyer on speed dial. Or maybe it's possible that the powers that be already know that. So more than likely you will be facing least resistance, can hire legal representation. So what do? Just go ahead and pay. Now, in closing, let's talk about small business owners. As I mentioned, you may get penalized by the IRS. Here's a part a lot of people do not see. Small businesses are the backbone of the country, of the economy. They do most of the hiring for a lot of people. So let's go ahead and get a quick example of what may happen, and I'm hoping not. But hypothetically, let's say this happens to a few small business owners, and they really much consider a small business owner, I believe, if you're like with some of these programs, I really can't say for the IRS, but in general, like 500 employees or less. Okay, so let's say you have a lot of small business owners and they have 100 employees or less, and they get penalized. What if they're not keeping good records? And note to self, for a lot of people, if you're doing these gigs like Uber and Lyft, I would highly recommend. It's been a while, but there's a channel called the CEO Drive Her. CEO Drive Her. And she talks about how people should handle that as a business and incorporating. So that right there, I'm just saying, a friend of mine did that kind of work for different, was it Instacart, Uber Eats, I believe. And yeah, you want to keep receipts. So that may be something. Again, I'm just saying you may want to consider watching. She had some videos of, I don't know her person, but a friend of mine told me about her when she was doing her thing, doing her divorce and all that. So anyway, let's go back to small businesses being penalized by the IRS if that were to happen. Let's say you have a small business owner or some, and they get penalized. They get audited. I hope they keep good records. Are they going to have the money for the attorneys? Not. So worst case scenario, what can you see coming out of that? If a small business is penalized by the IRS, you do understand. If they say, hey, you're X amount of dollars and you try to handle it on your own, you tell me how you're going to run your small business, sometimes working 10 to 12 hours a day. And also comply and produce records for the IRS. Tell me how you're going to get that done. And you have a family or you're single. So you're working, trying to get the business going, kind of keep it afloat. And it's now sometimes going to be more difficult than ever. And then you got to go ahead and get all these receipts and get all these questions answered. Then you look up, you still might owe. Oops, don't forget. They say you owe, you can't produce a receipt. Well, I had a fire. I moved from there and I got divorced and the records got lost. That's not their problem. So once you're penalized, they can say you owe X amount of dollars. They can also go back years. So when they go back years on your on the money, do not forget there's penalty and interest. Yeah. Penalties and interest. It's my understanding. So what if that happens and you look up, you got a big old what? A person was telling me just for 1 year, they look up and it was like, yeah, the accountant told them, yeah, I kind of owe additional $7,000. That's for 1 year. And if you can't pay it up at one time, then I guess you can do a payment plan. I was like, wow. So don't forget penalty and interest. So if you're a small business owner and they go back a couple of years on you, and maybe you've been doing something wrong because you can't afford the attorneys to legally represent you, what if they hand you a bill and said, okay, well, not so bad, but I'll tell you what, we're looking at here. Okay, that's going to be $15,814.39. And people say you can make a payment plan. You're cute. That is correct. Make a payment plan. If the business you work so hard and you're trying to survive, and especially for a small mom and pop business, you just incurred a new bill. So now you've got a new monthly bill that you probably can't afford, which will more than likely is going to consume all your profits. Where's the money going to come from? Do you raise the prices? Maybe, just maybe, you may have to reduce your employers, or better, you may have to just fire somebody and try to do that person's job. You may have to let someone go. But someone else need a job. Just like that IRS debt is your problem, then the job, that's their problem. So what may happen? You may have to go ahead and reduce your staff and just see who you can have left to save money, because the money's got to come from somewhere. People think like you just have a business and then you go out to the money tree in the backyard and you pull the money tree down. That's how it works to keep everybody working. It doesn't work that way. So what happens to the business owner? Well, some people may get so despondent and just say, you know what, they're already at their wits' end and give up. So I can't do this. So that happens to you. Then you've got next year's taxes come around the corner. Then what? And then what if you already owe, and then this happens to you? Now you have additional, you've got a tax bill that you cannot handle. What's going to happen to the entrepreneur? More than likely, a lot of them will shut down. And all it takes is a few more people to hear about things like that. They're going to get scared, shut down. Some people will be so frightened by it that the entrepreneurial bug will be you'll just kill it. So you'll have less businesses. If that business shuts down, somebody may have to lose a job. Some people may have to lose their job, or they may just have more layoffs. The money's got to come from somewhere. No one's going to burn through cash just to feed you and your family. Hate to tell you. Ask Amazon. And they have money. Life is business. All these companies cutting down, Twitter and all that, tech, they're going to burn through cash just to feed you, the survival of their company. So the same thing for the owner. These things start to happen. People don't think about. It's like, why go through it? I started a business. It becomes a nightmare. People are already stressed out and overwhelmed. This right here will put the nail in the coffin. So small business owners, the U.S. taxpayers been ripped off $400 billion. He said most of the fraud was foreign. And they're not going to go after it? They voted it down? But you're going to go after the Americans? That's what that news report sounded like to me. If they freeze the account, what you going to do? So yeah, people here, it says the IRS audits poor families, this article here, at 5 times the rate of everyone else. Maybe you don't know what poor means. That's right, they're poor. They got money for an attorney. They got them on speed dial. Come on. This, people, is going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. So the unemployment crime, $400 billion, voted down, let that go. So small business owners, poor people making $25,000 or less in gross receipts, $75,000 or less. Hope you keep good records. That's for all of us, myself included. It's going to be interesting. And I think if this, when this occurs, you're going to more than likely have a few horror stories, and that's all it takes. But it's definitely going to have an adverse effect on entrepreneurship. It will, trust and believe. We're just the backbone. Small businesses hire more people than anybody. So it's going to get real, and real quick. Let me know your thoughts on the matter. Feel free to comment, like, subscribe, and share. And I'm out.